doing? This is Lisa from Three of Skeins. I am restarting the podcast and I'm going to be doing it live. I know, right? What I want to talk about on this stream is what I finished last year, any books of note that I've discovered or rediscovered, uh, what it was like my first full year using a knitting journal. I've been a little catch as catch can with my record keeping about my knitting, and I'm trying to pull everything together. And I've had some results. I want to give you guys an update on my current project, and I want to share some tips and tricks about knitting from your stash. So, without any further ado, let's get going. I am a little embarrassed being a knitting podcaster essentially, but I only finished two projects last year. I'm just I'm just gonna put it out there on the table. I finished exactly two things last year, and I was kind of feeling a way about that. I love seeing those videos where the person has that stack of stuff that they knitted over the course of the year. I'm gonna confess, I watch a lot of those, but for me, it was a super busy season. All kinds of things were happening. I was traveling. I caught COVID for the first time. That was no fun. But through it all, whether I was knitting or I wasn't knitting, because I did have a stretch where I didn't knit a stitch. I don't know if anybody's ever like completely lost their knitting mojo like that. I mean, nothing. I didn't even wind yarn to pretend that I was going to start a new project. Um, I had no mojo. I want to say for a good 3 or 4 months, and slowly it started coming back. So the last video I did, I showed you my Tolsta tee. That's one project that I finished last year, and I forgot to bring it for the live. I didn't want to run off screen, so just check the last video. um, that tea, I don't even want to. I can't even guesstimate how long that took me. It took me forever to finish because there was a whole section of time where I just wasn't knitting and it languished. And you know what? A lot of times I don't go back to projects like that, but I'm so glad I did. There was something very satisfying about having a project that kind of languished for 3 or 4 months. And I was able to go back because I'm keeping a knitting journal now. I had notes, I pretty much knew where I was. And I could kind of pick up where I started. And it became a little bit more than a project. It became something that I needed to be complete with so I could move on to other things. And I'm really glad that I kind of, rather than let it languish in a corner and give me, uh, incomplete project shame every time I saw the bag it was in, I was able to just kind of get back on that horse and finish that project. And I think that's really what broke through the end of my knitting mojo. And when it was done, there was just kind of this sigh of relief because I didn't realize that there was some pressure there about having that project hanging over my head. I have a couple of sock projects that I need to finish too, and I think I'm just going to pick them up one by one over the course of 2026 just so that I can have that just be complete. And because I feel the pressure, and I know what that pressure is now, that it's just it's just that incompleteness sitting out there. So gonna get those done too. The other thing I finished was my color block vest. It's actually my first thing that I've designed 100%. on my own. So I'm really happy with it. It's a little wrinkled because it's been in a box. But this is her. I wanted to play with texture. So I have ribbing, cables, stockinette, and reverse stockinette. It's a little bit cropped, which I like that silhouette. And if you'll notice, there's a little red ribbon that I've stitched inside the collar. That is to remind me that this is non-superwash yarn. So I don't just, toss it into the washing machine, when I'm not thinking. So that's something you can do when you know something is hand wash only. I just put, this is actually just a little piece of red yarn. I just stitch it right into the neckline. So when I see that flash of red, red means stop. I knit this out of Universal Yarns Deluxe Worsted. It was a really nice yarn to work with. It's not crunchy, but it's not like super soft. And I do love the amount of stitch definition I was able to get. Let me get over here so you guys can see the texture. My cables pop. My ribbing is nice and sturdy. And it was actually a pretty simple design. I actually pieced it. So I knit the front, back, and side panels separately. And then I knit them together. So it's actually seamed in 4 places. I don't know. I think for a first design, I like it. I really do. And I've worn it a few times. And I had planned to make a skirt to go with it. So I think that's going to happen too. Now, ask me if I'm going to write up a pattern for this. I don't know. Because as much as I was touting my knitting journal, I'm not exactly sure I captured every detail. So, what I'm going to do for things that I do plan to write up is I'll plan them out first because I did do some planning on this, but things changed in the moment and I didn't take the most careful notes about everything. I might consider it, but it's something I'm gonna have to really like reconstruct how I did it. Hello, thank you for joining me. So, talking about my first design, my color block vest, I'm gonna have to give it a better name too, but that's what I call it because I love the color blocks. And I happen to really like the combination of color and texture. So anywhere I can get color and texture together, I'm going to do that. Now, I have been talking about my knitting journal. This is my knitting journal. I always forget I made stickers. I made stickers with my niece one time and I stuck them to my knitting journal and I forget they're there until I do something like this. But this is the Vogue Knitting Project Journal. I really like it. It gives you enough space for about 25 projects with a nice table of contents that you can actually put which project. And I haven't actually done that, so I might go back and do that. Something I did to it that's my own modification is that I take a little snippet of the yarn and I actually just tie it to the page. So it's like my own little yarny index. Now, I like a lot of the features of this book. I like that every project it has a certain number of prompts that remind you to write down important information like the needle size because that's something I'll forget to write down. The gauge, the measurements, and I really like that there is different kinds of paper. So there's graph paper for making a schematic, and there's dot grid paper for keeping your notes. Love that. And something else I started to do, I just go ahead and stick the ball band in the book so that I have all the details correctly. Because, if you're not really paying attention, like I'm sometimes not, I could write down the wrong thing. So now I have the dye lot, I have the color number, so I know I have cream and warm brown, and I have the correct name of the yarn. So as I was looking through this, I see that I had a lot of false starts over the year. I was planning to make a raglan style short sleeve tee for the winter, a winter style one. That one I actually ripped out back down to the studs. I have the yarn balled up. I will probably still get back to that. The socks I didn't finish. Overall, I think it's really a good book for people who are working from patterns because it really gives you just enough room. But as I started doing my own designs, I just needed more space, so I had to do things like start adding paper in different kinds of ways. So I think I'll be moving on from this in the new year as I design more of my own projects, just because I need a little bit more space than this provides. But if I'm just working from a pattern, it's actually fun, and I really liked it. And in the back, there's all sorts of helpful information like yardage estimates for different sizes. So it is actually very handy. I might actually rip out some of these pages and put them in a new notebook that I established for my knitting journey. So something to consider. For me, planning to work a lot more from my own stash this year. I have a whole lot of yarn, and as I go through it to try to organize it and make it very, more accessible and useful, because I find that having your yarn in your bins, in my bins anyway, I forget that it exists. And sometimes I pull out some yarn and I'm like, oh wow, this is nice. I didn't even know I had this. So I want to end that sort of thing and just be very aware of what I have and find interesting ways to combine it. So I just got this book. Oh, she's a heavy one. She's a 5 pounder. This is Making Marls by Celia Campochiaro. She also wrote something called um, Sequence Knitting. She's the author of Sequence Knitting. And what inspired me to get this book was um, the Otaheite cardigan that I'm working on. That is 100% out of yarn from my stash. And I was like, oh, I love how I was able to bring together different yarns to make this cardigan work. And one of the things I did was I plumped up some fingering weight yarn with some mohair to just make a heavier weight that would work better with the other yarns I already had. So that was like my little first step in the world of marling. And I got this because I'm inspired to use more of my stash by creating my own textiles by marling different yarns together. So in this book, she addresses what a marl is, how to marl in different kinds of ways, how to create sequences of marls, and she spends a good chunk of the book talking about color theory that will help your marls actually look good together, and how to work your sequences into your project. So I think this is going to help me really make my stash sing. So this is Making Marls by Celia Campochiaro. It just arrived a couple of days ago, and I just started to kind of look through it. I've read the preface and the forward, and some people I know think that makes me a nerd. So, are there any other preface and forward readers here? The other book that I'm actively working from right now is Cardigans for Everybody, and that is by Tian Connaughton. I love her approach. Her approach and my approach to knitting are actually very similar. I was never a person who could really match gauge well. I had some eccentric things happening with my knitting style, and it made it so that it was actually quite difficult for me to match anybody else's gauge. So, what I had to learn how to do was work to my own gauge using whatever information I got from the pattern. And this is this book matches my philosophy to a T. I don't try to match gauge. I work to my own gauge and I figure out how to make the pattern work for me. So in this book, Tian gives people four patterns, two crocheted, two knitted, for really cute cardigans that you can adjust so that you can work at your own gauge with your own yarn. So you don't have to run out and buy new yarn just because you got a pattern. And it'll make your stash really, really, really useful. It'll be like having your own little yarn store at home. So I'm also teaching a class based on this book, and we'll be making the Otahaite cardigan together, learning how to work at our own gauge with our own yarn or our own combination of yarns. Yeah, because you can do that too. So let me show you where I am. Let me show you where I am on my Otahaite cardigan. Let's pull this up. So just as a reminder, I'm working my Otahaite cardigan in stripes, and I'm using a little collection of yarns. So I have some mohair. I think this is a Universal Silky Kid. This is Ultra Wool Fine, and I'm holding these two together, my first marl. This is something called Jewels, and as you can see, it's a thick and thin kind of fun textured yarn. I've had this in my stash, I don't know how long. I couldn't think of anything to do with it by itself, but in combination with these, I'm so happy with it. Now this knits to sort of a bulky size, but I took care of that issue. And the yarn that inspired the entire color palette is Barocco Topaz. This is also a slightly thick and thin yarn that makes kind of eccentric stripes. So let me show them all together. Isn't that fun? Now my sweater is a little on the needles right now. But let me see if I can straighten her out so you can at least get a sense of what's happening. You know, I think I'll show you the back because that'll be the easiest way to see the stripes. Now this is a sideways knit. There you go. So I came up with a sequence for my stripes, and I'm just working my way across the sweater. I started at this sleeve and I'm working across to the second sleeve. And I just love how the colors are playing together. So that is the mohair and ultra wool. This is Barocco Topaz. You see how I told you that it stripes in and of itself? And that is Jewels. Now, how I decided what proportion to use them in was whatever I had more of, I use more often, and whatever I had less of, I use less often. So I only had 3 skeins of topaz in my stash. So I was like, okay, we'll use this the least, but I love its presence. Let me get my, yeah, you'll be able to see it better on my swatch. So that's my topaz. It's 8 rows across. I have the most of the mohair and ultra wool. So I have two stripes of that. One is 5 rows across, and the other is 13 rows across. And I have lots of jewels. So I just use jewels as my separator between each stripe. And so far, it's been really cool because I'm just getting to the end of my first ball of topaz. I think just 2 balls of this is going to work for the whole sweater. And I think, oh yes, I've used one whole ball of jewels. But guess what? I've got a bag of jewels. So I got plenty of jewels. I don't have to worry about running out of it. And I've used exactly 1 ball of the mohair and 1 ball of Barocco Ultra Wool. So it's also combining your yarns like this is also a great way to stretch your yarns because I'm using a little of a lot of things and it's taking me most of the way across this sweater. I have the second front to finish and I'm mostly done with that. And then I'll be doing the ribbing and the sweater will be done. So we'll see. I haven't decided if I'm going to stripe the ribbing also or if I will do the ribbing in some sort of solid color. We'll see how it goes. I'll have to play with that idea a little bit. I'm open to any suggestions though, so let me know in the comments which way you'd go. Would you also stripe your ribbing or would you go with some kind of solid combination? So this is my, I don't know, I've been working in my stash a while now, but I'm really kind of, how I was working with it is I would look and see what I have enough to do. So if I have a sweater idea that I want to make, I'd look and I'd go through my stash to find enough of that yardage to make the complete sweater. But I feel much freer now to try to combine different weights, different ways, different colorways into a full sweater's quantity because I have lots and lots of great yarn. But I did go through this period where I was only buying one or two skeins, so it didn't always feel like I had enough to do anything with, and that made me go out and buy more yarn. So you see how it's that cycle that can happen to you. After this experiment, I feel so much more confident in my ability to put together the yarns into something really fun. So I think what I'm going to do is embark on a little, and I hate to say it, a little stash organization project. We've got our workroom pretty much under control, so all of my yarn is in there. And it's all kind of boxed up right now, roughly organized by weight, but I don't think that's the way I'm going to want to organize them going forward. If anybody has any good ideas about yarn organization, I'm open to whatever suggestions. But right now, I think what I want to do is organize them by color because if I'm going to be combining different yarns into single projects, I think that's going to be the most useful um, organization and scheme for me. So if I know all my yellow yarn is here, all my blue yarn is there, I can then just search through by color, which is how I would search for things anyway. But that's what I'm going to be thinking about. And I'm not going to worry so much about what weight anything is because I can hold strands together to make them be whatever weight I need them to be or make them close enough. Because, like I said, this jewels yarn, the ball band recommended that I work it on a US 11 needle. I'm actually working it on a US 8, I believe. 5 millimeters. No, 5.5 millimeter. But because I'm working it on a smaller needle than it called for, it's really playing well with the other yarns and with the thick and thin nature of it. I even like that it doesn't really make a straight stripe. My stripe looks like it's moving back and forth a little bit like rickrack. So once you do your swatch and you like the look of it, that's the swatch you can measure and base your garment on. Now, do I dread taking all those yarns out of their boxes? Absolutely. But I'm gonna actually do it because I think it will make my stash much more shoppable. And I already know that 99% of what I have in my stash is yarn that I actually loved when I saw it. It made me go ooh, and I picked it up and I bought it. So I really want to put that yarn to use. I don't know how much. I'm not planning to do a no buy because I know that there's going to be yarn out there that turns my head over the course of the year. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm going to do that. But I'm going to shop my stash first before I move on to shopping for anything. So that if some pretty yarn does turn my head, it'll just I'll just get it because I want it. Anyway, I think that's about it for me. Um, I will see you guys in 2 weeks when I hopefully will have my cardigan completed because my knitting mojo is right back on. Anyway, have a great week, everybody, and I'll see you next time.